I never thought that owning a peaceful ranch would put me at war with a homeowners association. But when power-hungry board members tried to evict me from the land my family had owned for generations, I knew they messed with the wrong person. What followed wasn't just a fight. It was a full-scale, strategic battle that ended with me doubling their rent and blocking every single parking spot they thought they owned. Let me take you back to where it all started. I live on a ranch tucked just outside a suburban community, a piece of land I've called home since childhood. No HOA rules, no nosy neighbors. Just freedom. Or so I thought. One morning, I found an official-looking letter taped to my gate. That letter would kick off months of chaos. According to the HOA of the nearby development, I was suddenly in violation of community standards. Standards I'd never agreed to. At first, I laughed. A mistake, surely. My ranch wasn't even part of their jurisdiction, or so I believed. But soon, the letters turned into fines, and the fines turned into threats. They were serious. They wanted me gone. But here's the twist. Instead of backing down, I decided to hit them where it hurt. What they didn't know was that I held the key to their entire neighborhood. And once I figured that out, their reign was over. This is the story of how I fought back and won. Growing up on this ranch, life was simple. My mornings began with the smell of fresh hay and the sound of roosters crowing. I'd ride horses, fix fences, and enjoy the kind of peace city folks only dream about. My family owned this land long before any suburbs crept nearby. It was private. It was ours. But over the years, what used to be open fields gradually transformed into cookie-cutter neighborhoods. Developers bought every patch of land they could, throwing up houses like they were made of Lego blocks. That's when the HOA moved in. They took control of those communities, enforcing every ridiculous rule imaginable. Want to paint your house beige instead of gray? Denied. Want to park your truck in your own driveway? Sorry, not allowed. At first, I kept to myself. My ranch wasn't part of their development. I had no HOA fees, no meetings, no restrictions. They had their world, and I had mine. Until one morning, I received that letter. It claimed that due to a change in property maps, something buried deep in the town's rezoning laws, my ranch was now considered within the HOA zone, which meant I was supposedly under their control. That I remember staring at that paper in disbelief. Was this real? Could they actually do this? The arrogance was laughable, but then came the fines. They claimed my barn violated color regulations. My gravel driveway, not HOA approved. They fined me for livestock smells and the sound of my own rooster. They weren't going to stop. At first, I tried reasoning with them. I went to one of their monthly meetings, thinking maybe I could clear up the confusion. Instead, I was met with cold stares from a long table of HOA board members. Their president, a woman named Karen, yes, seriously, her name was Karen, told me point blank, "If you refuse to comply, we will begin eviction proceedings." Eviction? From my own land. They claimed that according to their new district overlay, my property was now under their visual impact jurisdiction. In simple terms, if my ranch didn't fit their aesthetic, I had to leave. My ranch, my home. They fined me $500 for every week I refused to comply. Then came threats of property liens. They even tried to block my access to community roads, despite the fact that public easements had existed long before their neighborhood was even built. It felt personal. Karen seemed determined to make me a public example, but I wasn't going to let them win. I started digging through every town record, every rezoning law, and every legal loophole I could find. That's when I stumbled upon something interesting. While the HOA believed they'd absorbed my land due to the rezoning, they'd overlooked one key detail. The land their entire neighborhood was built on still technically leased right-of-way. Access from my property. Long story short, decades ago, my grandfather had signed a unique agreement granting access roads to the town, roads that the HOA now used. And that lease? It was up for renewal. Suddenly, everything changed. I sat in my barn that night, paperwork spread across an old wooden table, realizing the leverage I held. For years, the HOA had used those roads, parking spaces, and common areas assuming they were town property. But they weren't. They were leased through an agreement nobody in the HOA even knew existed. I contacted a lawyer who nearly laughed out loud when I showed him the paperwork. "They're screwed," he said. And he was right. See, as the leaseholder, I controlled the terms of that land access. I could change the rates. I could restrict use. I could even revoke parking permissions entirely. And legally, they couldn't do a thing about it. The first thing I did? I served the HOA an official notice. Their lease renewal was coming up, and due to recent conflicts, I was doubling the rent for their common areas and roads. The amount? Enough to cripple their annual budget. But that wasn't all. That I issued a second notice stating that, effective immediately, parking access on the leased areas was suspended until payment was made in full. Every guest parking spot, every small roadway, blocked. Then I made it physical. I hired a contractor to install removable metal gates and concrete barriers at the entrances of those leased spaces. My property. My right. Karen and her board were furious. They tried to fight back. Legal threats, angry letters, community outrage. But I was covered. Every move I made was legally bulletproof. And I wasn't done yet. The day the gates went up, I sat on my porch sipping coffee, watching HOA board members scramble like ants. Residents couldn't park their cars. Delivery trucks were rerouted. Emergency access roads blocked off. HOA events canceled. Without access to my leased property, their neighborhood ground to a halt. They called an emergency meeting, which I happily attended. Karen's face was red with fury. "You can't do this," she snapped. I slid a copy of the original land lease across the table. I already did. Every board member fell silent as their lawyer flipped through the dusty old paperwork. The realization hit them all at once. Their HOA had no legal claim to those spaces without my consent. That I offered them two options: pay double the lease or keep the barriers in place. Their budget was already stretched thin. Paying me would mean raising HOA fees for every resident, something that would turn the entire community against them. And the residents? They were furious. People started questioning why the HOA hadn't known about the lease. Why were parking spots suddenly blocked? Why was their money being wasted fighting with a rancher? Days turned into weeks. I kept the barriers up. My land. My rules. Meanwhile, the HOA struggled to keep their community functioning. Tempers flared at meetings. Petitions circled calling for Karen's resignation. Finally, desperate, they caved. They agreed to my terms: double rent payments, back pay for the period of denied access, and a public apology admitting their mistake. The parking spots reopened on my schedule. That I wasn't petty. Once they paid up, I removed most barriers, but not all. Some remained as a constant reminder. Don't mess with the ranch. To top it all off, I used the rental payments they now owed me to renovate my ranch: a new barn, fresh gravel roads, and even a new tractor. All funded by the HOA that once tried to evict me. Their defeat was complete. But their humiliation? That lasted longer. In the months that followed, the HOA's leadership crumbled. Karen resigned amid growing outrage. New board members were elected. People who promised to never mess with the ranch again. Funny enough, those same people eventually reached out, politely asking to renegotiate the lease terms. I declined. I liked having the upper hand. The community, once hostile toward me, changed their tone. Neighbors waved instead of glaring. Some even apologized for what the HOA had done. I wasn't interested in making enemies, but I wasn't interested in forgetting either. Meanwhile, my ranch thrived. The rent payments from the HOA gave me a stable new income source. I invested in new livestock and expanded my property fences, ensuring no future land grabs could happen. I'd won the battle and secured my family's land for generations to come. Sometimes I'd drive past the neighborhood, watching residents park carefully, always aware of where my land boundaries were. The barriers stood as silent sentinels, a permanent reminder of the war they'd lost. As for Karen, last I heard, she moved out entirely. Maybe she found a new HOA to torment. But, hopefully, she learned not to underestimate a rancher who knows his land. So, what's the lesson here? Always know your land rights. What started as an attempt to bully me off my own property turned into the perfect revenge, all because I understood my history and my legal standing. HOAs can be necessary in some communities, sure. But when power-hungry board members try to push their control beyond reason, it's people like you and me who need to stand our ground. Don't assume they're untouchable. Sometimes, the smallest loophole can become your biggest weapon. For me, it wasn't about money. It was about principle. This land belonged to my family, and no suburban rulebook was going to change that. So, to anyone out there fighting their own HOA battles, do your research. dig into old records. You never know what kind of hidden leverage you might have. In the end, I didn't just protect my home. I turned the tables and made the HOA pay me, literally. And let me tell you, there's nothing sweeter than sipping coffee on your porch, knowing every car that parks nearby is paying you rent. Thanks for watching my story. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories. And remember, stand your ground and never let anyone take your freedom without a fight. Until next time, stay strong.